The second wave hit at 0340, station time, and I knew by then it wasn't a raid. Raiders probe, raiders test a perimeter, take what they can carry, and pull back before the math turns against them. What came through the eastern transit corridor of Meridian Station that morning didn't probe anything. It advanced in increments, calculated, unhurried, and when our bulkhead charges detonated and collapsed the corridor, the veteran assault units simply rerouted through the maintenance sublevel we hadn't thought to seal. No urgency, no aggression even, in any way I could name. They move the way you move when you already know the answer, and you're only waiting for the variable to stop resisting. I am a combat engineer. My name is Dale Varro, and I have been one for 19 years. I know how a deliberate advance feels when you're standing inside it, and what I felt in those hours was not an attack in any military sense I had trained for. It was a process. The Veteran Collective was running a process, and Meridian Station was the input. We held the research wing for 4 hours and 11 minutes. Senior researcher Calamantes organized the last 43 of us into a defensible cluster around the Verosi data cores, our allied engineers, the ones who had been working alongside us for 3 years on atmospheric mapping for Karath's system. And we held because Callum knew that wing's geometry better than the collective scouts did, and I made the geometry work for us as long as I could. We blew access points. We rerouted power to seal blast doors manually when the collective cut our grid. We did everything right, and it slowed Phase 3 of their operation by 2 hours and 17 minutes. I know that, because they logged it. When the evacuation pod I was sealed inside reached the fleet picket 3 days later, the after-action analysis team showed me the intercept, the collective's operational record of the Meridian Station action, transmitted in their own coordination frequency, rendered in their own notation. Phase 1, perimeter neutralization. Phase 2, primary grid suppression. Phase 3, research wing resistance, delay, 2 hours 17 minutes, within acceptable parameters. Phase 4, facility decommission, complete, 340 human researchers, 62 Verosi allied engineers. The Verosi had families on 3 separate stations and a homeworld that had stood beside us at the Karath Compact. Signing, the collective logged them all as facility decommission, not casualties, not combatants. A notation in a logistics record, filed under Grid Sector 7, Moon Karath 4, Expansion Corridor 9. I read that intercept 4 times before I fully understood what I was looking. The collective had not attacked Meridian Station because they hated us or feared us, or wanted what we had in any way I could call hunger. They had attacked it because it was in the way of a process, and they had categorized its removal the same way a construction crew logs the clearing of a site. The 402 people inside it were overhead. They were a variable that had exceeded acceptable resistance time and been resolved. I submitted my after-action report, my engineering logs, and a personal statement. Then, I requested assignment to Combined Reach Strike Command. That request was approved in 11 hours. I did not consider that fast. Under the circumstances, I considered it measured. What happened next took 14 months. I want to be precise about those 14 months, because the collective assumed the delay was weakness. They had data on human military timelines. They knew our fleet staging requirements, our logistics chains, our political deliberation cycles. They had modeled our response window and concluded that a measured human reaction would arrive diminished, compromised by internal argument, by the usual grief that slows institutions. They transmitted 3 subsequent coordination records on Karath 4 expansion logistics during those 14 months, each one logging further construction progress on the installation they were building on the ruins of Meridian Station. They were not hiding. They were not watching for us. They had concluded we were a bounded problem. They did not know what we had taken from the intercept. The collective's operational record was meticulous. Phase-by-phase notation, with timestamps and resource accounting to the decimal. Every countermeasure we had deployed at Meridian Station was documented. Every bulkhead charge, every manual door seal, every reroute I had run on the power grid, all of it cataloged in their after-action analysis as solved variables. They understood our engineering exactly. They had dissected us the way you dissect a problem you intend not to encounter again. So we rebuilt the problem. I spent 11 of those 14 months in the combined reach research bay at Harith Station, alongside the best systems engineers in the fleet, and what we built was not a weapon in any simple sense. It was an answer written in their own notation. Every phase they had run against us reflected back. Every countermeasure they had solved, rerouted and reintroduced at a scale they had not modeled. They had treated Meridian Station as a bounded problem. We treated the Vethran home system the same way. The Iron Ledger assembled at Harith Station on the 53rd day of month 11, four warships, combined reach strike command, under Fleet Admiral Marin Solev, a woman I had met once in a corridor and who had looked at me, the particular stillness of someone who has already finished their grief and is now entirely occupied with the work. The fleet designation was mine in the end. Someone asked what we were calling the operation, and I said we were collecting a debt, and the name held. I was aboard the escort carrier Resolved Measure when the Iron Ledger crossed into the Vethran home system. What happened next I will describe simply, because it was simple. Phase 1 of the Iron Ledger's operation. Grid suppression. The collective's coordination network ran on a distributed relay system. Elegant, redundant, effective against every adversary they had encountered. We built our oppression package specifically for it, using the collective's own frequency data from the Meridian intercept. The network went down in 40 minutes. They rerouted. We had anticipated the reroutes. We had read their operational record. We knew exactly how they thought when a variable exceeded expectations, and we had designed a Phase 2 for each decision branch. Phase 2, installation isolation. Phase 3, the requirement. Fleet Admiral Solev opened a channel to the Vethran Coordination Authority from the Bridge of Promise when Phase 3 was in effect. I was in the Fleet Operations Bay on Resolved Measure, watching the feed. The collective's response came in 2 minutes. They requested to negotiate parameters. They offered territorial concessions in the Karath corridor. They offered resource compensation. Their tone, translated through our linguistics package, carried something I had not expected from a hive coordination species, an absence. A gap where calculation should have been. Something close, I thought, to the first moment of not knowing the answer. Fleet Admiral Solev did not respond to the offer. She read aloud the names on the wall. 340 names. 62 Verosi names, rendered as accurately as our linguists could manage, in the Verosi phonetic form their families would recognize. She read every one of them, in order, beginning with senior researcher Callum Antes, and ending with the last Verosi engineer whose name appeared in the Meridian Station personnel manifest. She read them without pause and without inflection, the way you read a document into a record. Because that is exactly what she was doing. Collective held the channel open. They did not speak. When she finished, she said 6 words. Then she closed the channel. What came after will not detail, because it was not the point. The point was already made before a single Phase 4 action was executed. The point had been made in 14 months of work, in 44 ships, in a suppression package built from the collective's own notation. The point had been made the moment a fleet called the Iron Ledger crossed into a home system that had treated 402 human and Verosi lives as a decommission event and found waiting for it, something that had read every line of its own operational record and written a response in same precise, unhurried, phase-by-phase language. We do not forget the names. We do not mistake deliberation for hesitation. We do not consider the time it takes us, answer evidence that the answer is not coming. The collective had very complete data on human military timelines. They had no data at all on what humans do in 14 months, when the grief finished and the work begins. I submitted the final engineering report 41 days after the Iron Ledger action concluded. Then I flew back to Harith Station, walked to the memorial wall outside the Combined Reach Operations Center, and stood in front of it for a long time. 402 names, cut into pale stone in the morning light. Every one of them collected.